Okay, so Careercurves, not career paths. The reason that I have chosen this name is that a lot of people talk about having a career path. I want to have a career path. That kind of seems to be the typical paradigm, the typical kind of construct that people have. And it's really the wrong one to have. And I'm going to share with you why I believe that. My ultimate goal is to get you to take charge of your career, to inspire everybody in your life, particularly the women in your life, to take charge of their career. We have to remember nobody cares as much about our lives. Nobody cares as much about our career as we do. So stop giving that power away by expecting somebody else to manage your career for you. Own it, right? As Diane had said. So why do I think career paths is broken? So career paths requires predicting the future. It requires to say, if I'm young in my career now, what's going to happen in 30 years so that I can be relevant and I can have a job? And what's that path going to be? As if it's going to be straight. Maybe here I like this image. It has a little bit of ripples, but basically straight. And that's just not realistic. The world is evolving so quickly that we don't know what the jobs are going to be 10 years from now, 20 years, let alone 30, which is how long, many careers are. So the idea that we're going to have a clear-cut path is just doesn't make any sense. Also, too, when we do think there's a clear path, it actually isn't ours. It's somebody else's. We're going to be looking at somebody else and go, I want to be where they are. How did they get there? Well, that's their path. That's them. And what I'm curious about is, who are you and what's your path? Nobody else is quite like you. Your path will be unique. Your curves will be unique. Also, too, when we talk about career paths, we're also oftentimes talking about having somebody else in control of it. Having my manager come up with what my activities should be. Having my manager tell me how to grow and develop. And nobody, again, should own it. And also the last problem with career paths, there's probably many more. We could probably even talk about those and chat about those. But the other two is that as soon as you fall off the path, Diane, I'm going to use your story a lot, but you said you started in sales. And so for many people, right, when they stop sales, like when they're kind of like, oh my gosh, I started in sales and I'm not loving it, and they're stepping off the path, it's easy to feel like they failed instead of saying, no, there are better models that are more normal. And of course, you're going to hear from me, I believe curves is a much more normal model. Go from sales, curve into advertising. Here's a question for all of you guys. How many of you, and I don't know why I can't see, let me see if I can figure out how to see chat right now. Whoops. But I can't quite see chat right now. How many of you are on second or third or fourth careers? Maybe you could even give me, use that thumbs up thing since I'm not seeing chat right now. So Deborah and Adrian and Diane, right? Lots on, oh good, here's the chat thing. Anybody else on, here we go, let's see, chat. Anybody else having multiple careers at this point? 4, I like that. 15, I like that, right? 15. So my question is, why aren't we talking about that? Why don't we normalize this idea that we curve so that people can lean into that more, accept it more, and not feel like they're failing because they're responding to opportunities in front of them, right? So it's normal. You're not failing. In fact, curves are exciting, right? You're kind of like, oh, gee, I was doing training for many years. Now I'm podcasting. Guess what? It's exciting. And it keeps you relevant. Like we said, you can't predict what the world's going to be in 30 years. But if you keep curving, you're moving right with the world and you're still relevant. So with that in mind, what I want to do is show you a model of what happens in a career. And oops, that shouldn't have been the first. It's going to build. That shouldn't have been first, but that's okay. Here's what typically happens in a career. Let me get this to come up. Is that you've got axes, right? One axis is time. The other is impact. And so what we always want to be doing in our careers is making impact. And if you think about a role, a job as an S, when you first step into it, you're not going to make a lot of impact, because you need to learn the job. You need to get used to it, right? Your initial impact will be low. That's normal, right? Spend the time learning that role, learn the people, learn how a company operates. Then, as you start to hit your stride, your impact becomes steep. Perfect. But at some point, you also are going to start to taper off. And this becomes a risk for you, right? Because you're going to stabilize. And the risk, the tapering might come from complacency. You've gotten comfortable in the role. You're doing the same thing all the time. You're starting to taper. Automation might be coming in and doing some of your role, so you may not be as relevant. Technology, or frankly too, I would talk to this one woman, a woman named Natasha, who said, look, the job I was hired to do, frankly, if I did it well, it had a 2-year life. So I came in, I did the job, it had really high impact, but then I got it done. And so then it tapered off. And so we need to be able to recognize when we're at that kind of a taper point. Because what we need to do is, if we don't, we're going to go into a backslide and then we become in trouble, right? We're having negative impact. And when we really think about a successful career is a series of S's, and we string it together. And Diane, I'm gonna push back on you, because as you told your story, right? As you told your story, you said, I got to New York and that's when my career started. And that's just not true, right? Your career started back in sales when you were, and maybe even back when you had jobs as a kid, and you're learning things about yourself, and you're learning what you like and what you don't like. And you're going, look, I made impact in sales, but to make further impact in sales, that doesn't fit me. Wait, advertising, inflection point, boom, I want to do that. So your career started before New York, but maybe it went in a different curve at that point. Are you comfortable with me recharacterizing that for you?
No, actually, you make an incredible point, because when I look at it, it's part of, and I read in your bio this, you did the same as I did. I took a big salary cut to go from the sales side of advertising into strategy and creative, because I knew that it would be so much more fulfilling. And long term, it would be a better investment of my time. And I'd actually love it and be using my brain. And I could see how I could build from that. So you're absolutely right. I think it's when it took off when I came to America.
Or if I characterize it a different way, it's like, when you hit your personal stride, where you finally felt like your match. And what you just described is actually really common, right? When we're young in our careers, we're doing a lot of the shoulds. And I like to say, don't should on me. But we all get shoulded on by our parents or by others in our lives. You should go after a job that's practical. You should go after a job where you're going to make money. You should go after the family business, because that's what we've all done. You should be a scientist because you have such a scientific mind. And oftentimes it's after we've had a couple of early jobs that many of us go, wait a moment, I've done the shoulds, now I'm going to do me. Now I'm going to own it. And then we find and we hit another curve. And we take those things with us. The reference point that you made, I didn't mention this, but I actually started my career as a lawyer. So I made that investment. I went to law school. I practiced law for 13 months and 22 days. And then I was like, I can't do this. And I took a 50% cut in pay to move into human resources and learning and development. And I will pitch, there is an episode of Careercurves where I took a seat as the guest, and I actually tell my story. So you can absolutely check out the podcast and hear my whole story.
We'll do one.
So a couple more slides, and then I want to even invite everybody into the conversation, is that as you think about your career, here are some actions you can take. Anytime you're at the starting point of a new job, a new role, a new company, even if it's later on the curves, but at that early stage of an S, focus on getting up to speed. Young people oftentimes make the mistake where they walk into a role and the first thing they say is, how do I get promoted? And it's like, that's the wrong question to ask. The right thing is get up to speed, make impact, and then we're able to talk about you being promoted, because we're able to talk about the contributions you made and how you've contributed. when you're making impact, what you want to be able to do at this point is figure out how to extend that impact, right? You know, so the model I just showed you showed as if all the S's are the same size, and they're not. You might have one S with a really long impact, followed by a short S where you go and solve a problem, followed by another with a long S or a long impact. So they're all going to vary. But you want to look at how can you extend impact by learning, by building more relationships, by addressing a personal barrier that you may have, all kinds of ways to extend impact. One of the people I interviewed on the podcast, a guy named Corey, he really taught me something about this particular stage, which I thought was interesting. He was in a job. He's only about 35 now, so he's a younger man. But he was talking about how he was in the job and he was doing well, but he could see he was at risk of hitting a plateau, an inflection point. And he was like, okay, I need to extend my impact. And he went and he talked to his manager about what he could do to extend impact. And his manager was like, well, you could take on these responsibilities. He's like, no, I'm not interested in those. You could learn this. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. And as he kind of was hearing all this, he realized that he couldn't extend impact. And the reason he couldn't is he wasn't in the right role for himself. So he could take it so far, but to take it further, he frankly wasn't the right person. When you're hitting one of those inflection points, right now what you need to do is figure out, how do I get myself ready? It's the best thing we can do is create overlap in these S's and figure out how to get ready. And one of the biggest questions I've had from people when sharing this model is, how do I know? What are the signs and signals that I'm hitting an inflection point? And here are just some, but again, in a moment, I'm going to open it up and I'd love to hear from others, like, and you could share like how you knew. But if you can't connect your work to the missions and goals of the company or to your own mission and goals, right? That's a sign that your impact is waning. You aren't learning anymore. You're surviving, but you aren't thriving. You're busy working, but you don't feel like you're accomplishing much. Or you have deep expertise on one thing, and all the signs around you are that thing is becoming less important, either because it's being automated or the company is going in a different direction, but that deep expertise just isn't as valuable as it used to be. That's a tough message, but sometimes we have to be honest and hear it.